Hello and welcome to the Scramble. Today we discuss financial aid, tuition increase, and how political ideology on campus affects campus climate. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Sarah Coker, and this is the Scramble. Today I want to begin with the complex system of financial aid and how this system affects the students. Many families find financial aid confusing and non-transparent. The amount of available assistance is considered just as inadequate as the amount of aid available. There are clear difficulties for families trying to figure out what should be considered basic topics. Things such as grants and loans, or if needed, what types of loans their son and daughter need to take out to cover tuition fees. One problem is how financial aid is calculated, being that it does not consider family expenses nor the needs for savings. While this formula thinks a family could contribute thousands, it isn't always true. With less financial aid to go around and the calculations that determine aid eligibility being complex and not always an accurate representation of financial need, some would argue that the last thing students need is to be paying more money to go to college. Which brings me to my next topic, tuition increases. Let's start with a preface on why. During the recession, most states placed budget cuts to higher education. Nevada, in fact, dropped funding from $683 million in 2009 to $475 million in 2014. That's a 22% decline. With budget cuts to higher education, that means taking more money from students and their families who would have to pick up the tab. UNLV's tuition has nearly tripled in the past decade, and the new past tuition increases are the 12th passed since 2002. CSUN President Christopher Royes talks a little more about the small increase.
So the two fees that they're proposing to increase, one is tuition, and that's for people who are out-of-state students. So people who come from out of state, they'll pay a much higher rate. They are looking at a $500 increase over 2 bienniums, which is basically 4 fiscal years, so from fiscal year 19 all the way until fiscal year 2021. So that's the increase amount if they did 1.8% with the current proposal for each biennium. And then for in-state residents, so for people who pay what are called registration fees, it's just kind of a semantic. They call them 2 different things. But they would actually see less than a $10 increase over the course of those bienniums that I just mentioned with the current proposal. So obviously there's a little bit more of an impact on students who are from out of state, but this proposal is more so in regards to inflation measures, and they're not really trying to raise more state funds for more projects or anything like that.
At the end of the day, it is up to the UNLV community on how they feel about the tuition increase and if the benefits outweigh the difference of tuition. In other news, college campuses pride themselves on being diverse, but does that include political diversity? Nationally, 51% of students consider themselves Democrats and 15% consider themselves Republicans. While colleges hold a large percentage of future leaders, I firmly believe that students should feel free to express their opinions and have honest political dialogue. I would also agree that colleges should be encouraging such dialogue and have these ideologies be respected. That's no question, but some would argue, to what extent should students feel to express their political beliefs on campus? And should course content be reflective of all political ideologies? Conservatives argue that liberal students dominate campus conversation and that they're often outnumbered. Many times they feel excluded and they do not voice their beliefs out of the fear that their opinions will be seen as hate towards minorities or social movements. On the other side, liberals argue that progressive mentality on campus means multicultural minorities are more represented. I want to take the time to discuss these arguments after the break. Thank you for staying with us. We are joined by journalism student Ray Verderamo and Jared Justice. Thank you guys for being here. I want to start off with you, Ray. I want to talk about financial aid. A lot of families, they have difficulty knowing what loans, grants they need. How important do you think financial literacy is? Do you think students should be seeking out their own assistance, or should they be more pushing that towards us?
I'm amazed that they don't teach fiscal responsibility or financial literacy in high schools. I'm still amazed that they don't even teach, elementary school children about food, but financial financial stability is paramount to survival, especially in a capitalistic society. So absolutely, there should be more education regarding, how money works, how things are calculated, how need is determined, and that need thing. The trick about that is that each administration that comes in has a different set of parameters as to what those needs are and who needs it. For example, when President Clinton was in office, he had set the poverty level at 35,000 for a family, I believe of four. Don't hold me on that. About 35,000. But when George W. came in, he set the poverty level at 11,000. So it really depends. And right now we have Republicans who are in control. They are not advocates for higher education. They're usually the first to cut education. So in order to be able for families to find the needs and be able to assess what they need to look to other resources. The very first resource they should be calling is the Department of Education. And start from there and make phone calls and be honest. I don't understand. Please help me. There are so many different groups. There are different resources. There are even some groups on campus here in UNLV, and usually any college campus, especially the junior colleges or community colleges, where you can go in and they will help you, for nothing, or they will show you. It's not a question of whether or not they should be educated, is whether or not they should reach out. And that's what we should be advocating.
Jared, I know you've stated before in the past that you are a registered Republican. On the comments that she made regarding they're the first to cut education, how do you feel about financial literacy, the importance of it?
Well, first of all, they do teach financial literacy in most high school classrooms, and it's basically you have to take accounting in order to graduate.
Where?
It's at least in 34 states, maybe not Nevada, but Missouri, Tennessee, New York. That's a basic class that you have to take in order since 2006.
Okay, because I graduated in 1998.
Okay. So, and then as far as cutting education is concerned, I got nothing on that. That's something that administrations do, where they can find money, because they're not going to cut the military, so they have to cut money somewhere. The only thing I can really think of as far as financial literacy is concerned is I don't think that we're really going to have much of an issue, because everyone's going to be in debt. So if everyone's
mentioning that most students will graduate with debt.
But we created the problem.
Can you elaborate on that?
We created the problem of everyone's going to be in debt, because in order to get a job that's going to pay well enough, you have to have a college degree, because we've decided that everyone has to get a college degree. And then we basically created some sort of system that, all right, so in order to do that, the baby boomers didn't save any friggin' money, so then none of their kids, they all expected their kids to go get scholarships. None of them did. So the government then had to farm out a private organization like Sallie Mae in order to be able to fund college education that these kids need in order to get a wage. So they're starting off in debt, and then they're going to be paid a job, so that they're in order to get a job, in order to live, they have to be in debt. In order to not be in debt, it's a vicious cycle. And we created it because we don't want people to just have a high school diploma. That's not good enough. No, everyone has to be educated, and the problem with that is that's the job market. The job market created that problem. The education problem, as far as funding and loans and debt, that's a symptom of the fact that some guy decided that you needed a high school diploma to be a friggin' custodian.
Would you agree that if more students knew about how financial aid worked, how the system worked, would you guys agree that we wouldn't have such a big problem with debt if people were more informed?
I don't think that'll make a difference because our country was founded on debt. Our currency system was founded on debt. The federal bank was founded on debt. We are right now, how many trillions in debt right now?
8, 9.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought it was 11, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, debt is, debt is about as, natural to Americans as death and air and water. I mean, that's just how it is. The real problem, if you break it all down, is that people are not willing to part with their money. I understand that. I do understand that. However, I would be willing to part with my money if I knew that it was going to pay for somebody else's health care. I would be willing to part with my money if I knew that it was going to fix roads and if I knew it would help someone build a better life. And the problem is that there's too much distrust and there's too much us and them in this culture right now, that anybody who needs help are freeloaders and whatnot. And we're just not connecting. And that's what the real problem is.
Jared?
Well, I think that it's the problem when you're connecting education to a better life is it's demonstrably not going to be true. Like, we currently have problems getting welders in this country. We have way more. We have a ton of people with degrees in psychology. We need people to build things.
But we don't go to college today for better jobs anymore. Everybody knows that.
No,
you go to college to make a better you. You go to college to network. You go to college to build your character. You go to college to hone your skills, to learn how to be creative, to learn how to be critical thinkers and to think outside of the box. You're absolutely right in the sense that higher education does not guarantee better jobs or jobs in your field anymore. That's absolutely true.
With college, we know tuition is a fact. I'm going to switch the topic into tuition, and tuition increases. Relates back to financial aid and debt. I want to go to you, Jared. Even though the proposed tuition increase is a small one, do you think it's significant? Do you think it's a trend we can see for more years to come as it has been?
Well, all right, so there's two proposals on the table, right?
Correct.
There's we're gonna increase tuition for out-of-state students, which becoming an in-state student is laughably easy. So that's basically that's putting a Band-Aid on a open wound. And then the other one is a small increase amongst everyone, which kind of goes back to the initial problem of we have to get the money. We raise tuition, so then we take out more loans, and then our education is further devalued there, and then once we get out of college, we have a ton of debt. So we're not creating any solution with either of these. If we need more funding, you just take it, because at this point, if we're running on a excess of debt, that's the only thing you can do.
You mentioned out-of-state students and the process of becoming an in-state student if you come from out-of-state. Do you think that the university is going to see out-of-state students not wanting to come here since tuition keeps increasing for them?
Well, but if you actually think about who are out-of-state students, they're athletes, they're on scholarship. The people who come here are specifically coming here because they're not going to have to pay for their tuition. So that's not a broad. Yeah. I'm painting with a very broad brush, but specifically, if we're looking at percentage, what percentage of the people are in-state and what percentage are out-state? So we're shifting this small amount of extra capital for what? They already pay more, and there are already way less of them. So, what are we doing here? I'm not comprehending how this is even a proposal.
Ray, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have to agree a lot with what he had to say. It's essentially, to put the burden back on the students is just, I think there are more creative ways that a college, our university can find the funding for whatever it is. And that's the other question is, what are they using it for, right? We just built this big, beautiful hospitality building. They are talking about revamping or upgrading the student union, which I think is only 5 years old as it is.
Would you be for tuition increases if that meant expanding facilities that we have?
I would be for tuition increases if it meant getting rid of the sinks that you need Tai Chi in order to register. I would be okay with raising my tuition if it meant renovating the old ghetto buildings in the north. You ever walk into those? It's like, where is Nurse Ratched? It's like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Creep me out. You know it's hot. Somebody died in here. You know someone died in this building.
The haunted elementary school.
Oh, my nerve. Yeah. I mean, American Horror Story, there you go. But I would be okay with that. Mm-hmm. I would not be okay with making me go into more debt to revamp a new building, mm-hmm. or to go into more marketing, because right now, I mean, UNLV's marketing is fine. So I would be more interested to know where the money was going. And as for taxing the out-of-state students, I think that's ludicrous, because right now, yes, they already pay, or they're on scholarship. So that means third parties would be paying. But it also, I think it would deter diversity. And we're ranked as, one of the second most diverse schools in the country. And I think that's something worth holding on to.
That's a great point you bring up, that we are one of the most diverse campuses in the United States. I want to talk about political ideology and how students on campus identify, what they identify as. I'm going to start with you, Jared. What has your experience been so far on campus with political ideology and political dialogue?
It's mostly been fine, like demonstrably fine. Like the only time there's ever really been any sort of like shutting down of ideas are whenever comments were made that were overtly sexist or borderline prejudice. And at that point, that's not a political ideology, that's just being wrong. So...
What draws the line between you can express this, you cannot express this?
Well, I don't think there's a line as far as like you can express this, you can't express this. It's, you really want to express that? That's where we're kind of running into a lot of issues, and at least from this weird narrative that I keep hearing from my fellow Republicans, that it's like, oh, you can't be around, oh, there's all these liberals and you can't express your ideas. And it's like, really? Because I've had no problem. I've really ran into no problem. Mind you, I'm a white male, so I probably wasn't going to have a whole lot of issues anyway. But it's really easy to go back and forth, especially if, like, you come here because it's a laboratory. It's here to challenge you. If you just need to be reinforced, there are several religious schools in the Midwest.
Should Trump supporters on campus be allowed to express that, even though there has been evidence of Trump making overtly sexist or racist comments?
But that's the difference, is if that's the part of Trump that you like, then you're not a Republican or a Democrat at that point, you're a bigot. Like that's not political speech. Political speech is, I agree in a strong border wall. I personally don't, but that's if the reason you agree with Trump is because of his immigration policy, not the fact that he called nations a certain word. Yeah. But it's that level of distinction where if you're going to express the idea that, look, we need stronger immigration control, and this is why, because these, people overstay their visas, and that's how this X, Y, and Z terrorist attack happened. That's at least a cogent argument, and I've never seen anyone shut that down from a liberal perspective.
Right, I'm going to bring this question to you. Same question, should Trump supporters be allowed to express that?
Well, that's the problem. I think you brought up a beautiful, point, is that there's a difference between supporting bigotry and supporting a political ideology. It used to be that Republicans and Democrats would discuss policies. If they would disagree on policies and priorities, for one, it's gun control. Another one is, protecting the Second Amendment. And, it's those kind of policies. But now, because this man who has openly proclaimed himself to be a sexual predator and has no problem grabbing anybody by the cat there, and who has insulted our allies and has made a mockery of our standing in the world, because he calls, white supremacists fine people. Now there's the line between politics and life, and life, I guess you want to call it morality, has changed. It's the line is blurred. It used to be policies. Now it's about your values as a human being. So it's not. So when people say I support Trump because I agree with his immigration policy, it's very difficult for someone to look at that and not see the bigotry that is behind his immigration policy. So my question is now, why we don't see as much diversity, political diversity on campus, is because, again, Republicans and conservatives are not advocates for higher education. They're more for trade schools, because they want workers. They don't want thinkers. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to see as many Republicans. But as you said, there is more discussion. And besides, this is a state-run college. First Amendment, we are all protected. Mm-hmm. Everyone should feel safe. The thing is, if it's kind of like what the Clash said, you have the right to free speech as long as you're not dumb enough to actually try it.
You bring up an interesting point. I'm going to bring this question to Jared. Do you believe that there are automatic assumptions that are made about people who identify as conservative, Republican, or Trump supporters?
Well, I mean, I make assumptions as a Republican, I wouldn't identify myself as a Trump supporter. But there is the assumption that, we're automatically racist, we're automatically bigots, we're automatically these things, and it's like, yes, obviously, there's a lot of evidence to say that Republicans were complicit, as were Democrats, in lots of policies that defunded or defrauded women and blacks, and basically both parties came together to create housing discrimination, worked on it together. So there are a lot of issues that it would be interesting to hear a Republican have a stance on them, but unfortunately we don't get there, because as soon as the policies are brought up, it's automatically assumed that the Republican's going to come on to the side of bigotry or the side of some sort of divisive, nationalistic ideal.
Well, can you blame, with everything that's going on right now, can you blame them for making that assumption?
Well, then you're just painting everybody with the same broad brush, and
well,
that's something that I try to avoid. Typically, I don't assume just because somebody is a Democrat that they're, a hippy-dippy, this is what's going on, or I don't assume that because someone is pro-gun that they're pro-Trump. People are an amalgamation of a large spectrum of things. You can be a anti-gun Republican just like you can be Joe Biden. And so to run on the assumption that, okay, hey guys, I'm going to talk about immigration now. Oh God, no one listen. He's going to say something offensive, or she's going to say something offensive, is shutting down the very type of conversations we need in order for us to have any sort of reconcilability as a party. Everybody's mad that Trump took over the Republican Party. Republicans are mad that Trump took over the Republican Party. But we can't just abandon it and go, okay, we're going to go join the Democrats now.
Right.
Because all that's going to do is pull the Democrats to the right.
No, I completely agree, and it's, you know, I have to say, this is one of the very few times that I have had the pleasure of somebody, you know, separating the ideology from the, from the mentality. Because I have tried to engage. I am very active on social media. I'm a journalism student. I am very, very active on blogs. I'm a writer, and I reach out to people, and I try. I do. I want to understand, what is it? Why do you, and I ask questions. Why is it so difficult for you, to be politically correct? Why do you think it's so great for this guy to come out and say these, things? And it's very difficult to be able to listen and understand, when a lot of it really has to do with, either trying to preserve the patriarchy or the white privilege.
I am glad that we can all agree that political discussion is important.
Absolutely.
I want to thank our two panelists, journalism students Ray Viteramo and Jared Justice. If you want to stay up to date with us, you can follow us at UNLV, the Scramble on Facebook. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.